The invasion begins. The sky over Earth split open with fire. They came without warning. Thousands of alien ships, bristling with weapons humanity had no names for, descending like a storm of metal. Their armadas blanketed the heavens, blocking out the stars. Cities panicked. Governments scrambled to respond. Ordinary people did the only thing they could: run, hide, pray. The invaders were the Draeger, a species bred for conquest. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies were slabs of muscle plated with natural armor, their four-fingered hands made for crushing bones. For centuries, they had subjugated weaker races across the spiral arm. Earth, they believed, would be no different. From their perspective, humans were frail, soft-skinned bipeds who relied too much on fragile machines. Their intelligence was noted, yes, but what use was cleverness against overwhelming strength? To the Draeger, conquest was a ritual. Land, crush, enslave, move on. Earth was to be their next trophy. When the first waves landed, resistance was swift but futile. Fighter jets streaked into the sky, only to be vaporized by precision beams. Armored divisions rolled out, but Draeger walkers stomped them flat. Civilian militias fired rifles into the towering enemy soldiers, and their bullets did little more than scratch. Victory seemed certain. In orbit, Draeger commanders debated how long Earth would last. Weeks, perhaps months. A few joked it would be over in days. They laughed when reports came in of humanity's counteroffensive, the first deployment of ground troops. But then, the laughter turned to confusion. The humans were sending them. From every major city, from every ruined hospital and abandoned shelter, they marched, or limped, or rolled forward in wheelchairs converted into armored rigs. Some carried rifles that looked too heavy for their thin arms. Others leaned on walking sticks, yet strapped explosives to their backs. The Draeger scouts transmitted live feeds. The humans were not sending their strongest, nor their veterans. They were sending their weakest. Old men with hollow eyes. Women with frail, wiry frames. Youngsters stunted from hunger, their bones sharp under their skin. Some wore oxygen masks as they shuffled forward, tubes hissing faintly even as artillery fire scorched the ground around them. The alien officers were bewildered. Was this surrender? A twisted joke? General Traff, commander of the Draeger's spearhead, scoffed at the sight. Is this what they call an army? These are cattle, not soldiers. His lieutenants agreed, laughing. To them, this was a final humiliation. Humanity sacrificing its weakest to die on the battlefield. Perhaps it was even an attempt to appease the Draeger, offering their sick and frail as tribute. But the humans did not kneel. They did not beg. They advanced. The first skirmish came on the outskirts of New Shanghai. A unit of Draeger shock troops, armed with plasma glaives, met a scattered group of frail human fighters. The aliens charged, eager for slaughter. The humans didn't flinch. A skeletal man, his uniform hanging loosely from his thin frame, pulled the pin on a grenade and ran forward with startling speed. He dove beneath the lead Draeger and clamped himself to the warrior's armored leg. The explosion shredded them both. Another human, coughing blood into a cloth, knelt in the rubble with a long-range rifle. His hands trembled, but his shot was steady enough to pierce an alien's exposed eye. A girl barely past adolescence, thin as a shadow, scurried between corpses to plant makeshift bombs scavenged from collapsed buildings. The detonations toppled 2 Draeger war machines before they knew what hit them. Reports trickled back to General Traff, and for the first time, there was no laughter. They do not retreat, one officer muttered. Even when their bodies fail, they fight. It is unsettling. In city after city, the same stories emerged. The frail fought with a madness the Draeger had never seen. They did not care for survival. They did not seek mercy. They fought as if every breath, every heartbeat, was already borrowed, and they intended to spend it killing invaders. It wasn't just their attacks. It was their eyes. To the Draeger, death was something to fear. But the frail humans had lived with death pressing down on them their entire lives. Cancer, starvation, failing lungs, brittle bones, these had been their constant companions. Now, Facing alien warriors, they showed no fear. If anything, they looked almost eager. On the third day of the invasion, Draeger Command intercepted a human transmission. It was a speech broadcast from one of Earth's surviving leaders. The message was simple, spoken in dozens of languages at once. You came to conquer. You saw our cities burn. You believed we were weak. So we send you those you call the weakest. And if even they are enough to resist you, ask yourselves, what chance will you have when the rest of us rise? The alien officers exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they felt a tremor of doubt. The humans had sent their frailest, yes. But frail did not mean helpless. Frail meant used to suffering, used to fighting battles their bodies had already lost long ago. And now, all that suffering had been turned outward, directed at the Draeger. The war for Earth was not going to be the easy conquest they had expected. It was going to be something else entirely. Something far worse. The weak unleashed. The first Draeger battalions expected slaughter. They thought the frail humans would collapse at the first charge, crumpling under plasma fire and the weight of alien blades. Instead, they encountered something entirely different. In the shattered streets of New Shanghai, the frail army did not march in formations or hold defensive lines like a traditional military. They scattered like smoke, vanishing into ruins, sewers, basements, and rubble-strewn alleyways. Draeger warriors thundered after them, only to be lured into narrow corridors where their size was a liability. The humans were waiting. A malnourished boy no older than 16, ribs jutting through his tattered uniform, lay in the shadows with a bundle of wires and a car battery. As the Draeger stomped into the alley, he touched the wires together. The explosion tore through their armored chests, and when the dust settled, the boy was gone, limping away into another maze of debris. Reports poured in. Draeger commanders grew frustrated. These are not warriors, one officer spat, staring at live feeds of skeletal men and pale women hauling jury-rigged weapons. They are vermin, but vermin survive. Vermin multiply. Vermin are impossible to kill. The frail humans had no illusions of glory. They did not fight with precision drills or military grandeur. They fought dirty. They fought with desperation. And they fought with a knowledge the Draeger lacked. The experience of pain, weakness, and endurance. At dawn on the fifth day, the Draeger launched a concentrated sweep through Old Cairo, deploying war walkers to flush out the weaklings. Plasma fire incinerated buildings block by block. Alien loudspeakers roared in broken human dialects, "Surrender your weapons. Mercy will be granted." Mercy. The word was bitter. Inside a ruined hospital, a group of women with skeletal frames and sunken eyes listened to the alien voice echoing through the rubble. They had once been patients, chemotherapy survivors, oxygen-dependent, once too frail to walk more than a few steps. Now, armored exosuits scavenged from wreckage bore their fragile frames upright. Tubes hissed, pistons whirred, and the women moved with mechanical steadiness into the streets. The Draeger fired. Plasma bolts carved into their suits, but the exoskeletons did not fall. With calm, almost mechanical precision, the women fired back, drones they controlled from within the rigs swarming like wasps, dropping explosives onto the towering invaders. The hospital patients, once written off as fragile, shredded an entire Draeger platoon. The aliens expected screams of pain. Instead, they heard laughter, thin, rasping, almost delirious. The frail had already suffered more agony than the Draeger could inflict. A plasma burn was just another kind of pain. In North America, another battle raged. A rail yard in Chicago had become a trap. Draeger squads moved in, armored boots clanging against the steel tracks. They advanced confidently, sensors sweeping for enemy movement. Then the ground gave way. Starved miners and factory workers, thin as shadows, their cheeks hollow, had tunneled beneath the yard. They emerged like ghosts, throwing Molotovs and jury-rigged explosives upward. Train cars, pre-rigged with fuel tanks, detonated in sequence. The entire rail yard became a firestorm, consuming Draeger soldiers by the dozen. When the smoke cleared, The survivors found graffiti scorched into a steel beam, written in English and blood. The weak endure, the strong burn. Alien Command began to take the threat seriously. At first, the reports seemed exaggerated, outliers, chance victories. But the pattern grew. Every battle involving the frail humans ended the same way. Casualties far beyond projections. Draeger troops shaken, morale shaken worse. General Trath reviewed the data, his armored fists clenching. These humans, the weakest among them, are more dangerous than the strongest species we have faced. His lieutenants shifted uneasily. One whispered what none dared to say aloud. If these are their weakest, what will their true armies be like? Meanwhile, the humans fought on, growing bolder. Stories spread among the frail units. Tales of individuals who had become legends overnight. Old Man Rodek, 75 years old, who strapped explosives to his wheelchair and rolled it into an alien tank, smiling all the while. Nura, once bedridden, who now piloted an exosuit that crushed Draeger skulls like glass. The Ash children, malnourished street kids who learned to swarm the massive aliens in packs, striking weak points and vanishing before retaliation. Each story was passed like fire from one camp to another, fueling a strange, terrible hope. For the first time, humanity's civilians began to believe survival was possible. Not because of the strong, but because the weak refused to die quietly. The Draeger, however, began to crack. Warriors who once reveled in conquest now hesitated before entering human ruins. Whispers spread through the ranks. The frail humans fought like demons, immune to fear. They did not stop. They did not surrender. Even mortally wounded, they dragged aliens down with them. What the Draeger did not understand, but humanity did, was simple. Strength had never been about muscles. It had never been about armor or weapons or towering bodies. Strength was surviving when everything said you shouldn't. The frail humans had been doing that all their lives. Now, they were teaching the invaders the same lesson, one corpse at a time. And for the first time in Draeger history, the predators felt what it was like to be prey. Cracks in the invaders. The Draeger had never known fear. On their homeworld, they were the apex, hulking predators with no rivals. Across the stars, every conquest had been simple. Crush resistance, enslave survivors, and move on. To them, war was a ritual, not a risk. But Earth was different. By the third week of the invasion, something strange began to spread through the Draeger legions. It wasn't a disease. It wasn't sabotage. It was something worse. It was doubt. In the shattered ruins of Berlin, a Draeger patrol advanced cautiously. The streets were silent, too silent. Broken towers loomed overhead like jagged teeth. One warrior muttered that he could smell human blood. Another said he could hear breathing. Then a voice rasped from the shadows, "Come closer." A figure stumbled into view. A man so emaciated his uniform hung like cloth on a skeleton. His chest heaved, every breath wheezing through cracked lips. The Draeger raised their weapons, amused. One even lowered his glaive, mocking. The man grinned. He pulled the cord. The street exploded. Buildings toppled. Fire erupted. And the last sound the Draeger heard was the humans' broken laughter. When command retrieved the footage, soldiers whispered of the skeleton men, humans who were already half dead but too stubborn to stay down. Elsewhere, in the jungles of South America, the Draeger suffered another humiliation. They had driven human civilians into the rainforest, confident the weaklings would wither without shelter. Instead, the survivors adapted. Frail tribes of malnourished villagers and refugees turned the rainforest itself into a weapon. They smeared toxins on sharpened stakes. They set pit traps hidden beneath foliage. They unleashed swarms of venomous insects against the aliens, who had never faced Earth's cruel biodiversity. A Draeger platoon, armored and bristling with plasma weapons, marched confidently into the undergrowth. Hours later, only 2 survivors stumbled out, one blind, his armor corroded, the other delirious from poison. Their report chilled their commander. The jungle belongs to the humans. Even their weakest thrive here. Back in orbit, General Trath slammed his fist onto the war table. The holographic map flickered as red markers, signifying Draeger casualties, multiplied across Earth's surface. "This is impossible," he snarled. "We are losing soldiers to starved cripples, dying elders, children with sticks." "Children." No one corrected him. He paced, mandibles clicking in frustration. "Explain it. Why do they fight so hard when their bodies are so weak?" An older strategist cleared his throat. "General, perhaps weakness is their strength. They have learned to survive through suffering. What we call frailness, they call endurance." Trath bared his fangs, but he could not dismiss the words. Too many reports matched the theory. The frail humans did not break when wounded. They kept fighting. They did not panic when cornered. They turned it into an ambush. They did not surrender when overwhelmed. They dragged Draeger down with them. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting because survival was all they had ever known. Among the Draeger ranks, fear became whispers. Warriors muttered of the gray ghosts in Europe, frail elders who appeared in ruined cities at night, sniping aliens from impossible distances. They told stories of the breathless, oxygen-masked humans whose hissing tanks echoed in the dark before bombs went off. Every myth grew from truth, and every truth spread like infection. For the first time, the Draeger feared shadows. They hesitated before entering ruins. Their commanders shouted and threatened, but hesitation lingered. Predators who had never known prey now glanced behind them constantly, waiting for frail shapes to emerge from the dark. In the ruins of Mexico City, one such story unfolded into legend. A Draeger warlord, massive even by their standards, plated in ceremonial armor, challenged humanity to single combat. He broadcast the demand across open channels, mocking them. "Send me your champion. Let us end this war quickly." The humans answered, not with a towering warrior, not with an elite soldier. They sent a woman so thin she could barely hold her weapon. Her back was bent from years of sickness. Her hands shook as she stepped forward. The Draeger warlord roared with laughter. The duel began. The alien swung his glaive in a deadly arc. The woman staggered aside, barely avoiding the blow. She didn't fight with strength. She fought with cunning. She threw dirt in his eyes. She struck joints instead of armor. She used the ruins around them, knocking debris loose to trip him. Every move was desperate, ugly, and dishonorable, and it worked. Minutes later, the warlord fell, his throat slit with a scavenged blade. The woman collapsed beside him, too weak to stand but still alive. Her name was whispered across human channels. To the Draeger, she became a nightmare, the frail champion. General Trath tried to rally his soldiers with promises of glory, but even he could see it. His army was cracking. Draeger were deserting, fleeing back to ships, feigning injury to avoid patrols. They no longer looked down on the frail humans. They looked over their shoulders, expecting to die. In every ruined city, in every jungle, in every broken battlefield, the weakest humans had become symbols. For their own kind, they were proof that survival was possible. For the Draeger, they were proof that conquest was not. One night, in the silence of his flagship, Trath reviewed footage of the battles. Frail humans coughing blood as they planted bombs. Children with hollow cheeks gutting armored giants. Elders strapped to machines that kept them alive long enough to kill. And always, their eyes. Eyes that showed no fear. Eyes that had already lived through hell long before the Draeger arrived. For the first time in his long career, General Trath admitted the truth to himself. "We did not invade the weak," he muttered. "We invaded the unbreakable." Victory of the frail. The war should have ended weeks ago. By every metric, Earth should have fallen. The Draeger had the superior fleet, superior weapons, and warriors bred for conquest. But instead of triumph, their campaign had collapsed into chaos. Every city they seized turned into a graveyard. Every patrol ended in blood. Every night, rumors of frail humans grew darker and more terrifying. Soldiers whispered of walking corpses who fought without fear, of children who planted bombs beneath their beds, of old men who detonated themselves with laughter. The Draeger had come to conquer. Instead, they were being hunted. General Trath paced the bridge of his flagship. His claws gouged the metal railing as he stared at the holographic war map. Red losses bled across the display, spreading faster than reinforcements could arrive. "Unacceptable," he hissed. "We are Draeger. We do not retreat." But his officers avoided his eyes. They had already begun considering retreat. Their troops were exhausted, not from human weapons, but from human will. For the first time in Draeger history, morale had collapsed. The predators were afraid. On Earth's surface, the frail pressed the advantage. In Paris, survivors hidden in catacombs emerged with makeshift flamethrowers, engulfing alien patrols in fire. In Mumbai, skeletal youths dragged a crashed gunship into a choke point and detonated its engines as Draeger pursued them. In the steppes of Mongolia, oxygen tank fighters turned their hissing breaths into a battle cry as they detonated charges beneath an armored convoy. The frail had become an army, not of strength, but of inevitability. Every time the Draeger killed them, more rose from the ruins. Every time the aliens thought they had crushed the weak found another way to endure. Then came the final strike. The Draeger prepared a concentrated assault on New York, their last attempt to break Earth's resistance. Warships blotted out the sky, walkers marched in formation, and thousands of soldiers flooded the ruins. But waiting for them were not tanks or heavy infantry. It was the frail, old women with rifles steadied by trembling hands, sick men dragging oxygen tanks behind them, children too thin to lift rifles, carrying bombs instead. A wall of humanity that should not have been able to stand, and yet they did. The Draeger laughed at first. Then the battle began. Explosions erupted from beneath the streets as sewers collapsed. Walkers stumbled into sinkholes filled with fire. Snipers hidden in broken skyscrapers picked off alien officers one by one. Civilians dragged Draeger down with ropes, swarming them like ants. The weak fought like gods. Hours stretched into days. The Draeger offensive stalled. Supplies dwindled. Ammunition ran dry. Even war machines faltered under endless sabotage. And always the frail pressed forward, coughing, limping, bleeding, but never stopping. In the chaos, a human transmission pierced Draeger communications. It wasn't encrypted. It wasn't military. It was a broadcast from Earth's leaders, played across every frequency. You thought us weak. You saw our sick, our dying, our broken, and you laughed. So we sent them to face you. And if they could break your armies, what chance would you have against the rest of us? Silence fell across Draeger channels. The truth struck like a blade. They hadn't faced Earth's armies. They hadn't even faced Earth's soldiers. They had faced those humanity itself had once considered frail. And they had lost. General Trath realized too late what had happened. The humans had shown him their weakest first, knowing the Draeger would underestimate them. It wasn't just defiance. It was strategy. A message carved in blood. If even the frail can kill you, what do you think the strong will do? Fear became panic. Orders dissolved. Draeger squads abandoned positions, fleeing toward extraction points. Warlords fought each other to secure space on the retreating ships. The predators had become prey. When the last Draeger warship fled orbit, Earth was burning but unbroken. On the ground, survivors emerged from rubble. Frail fighters, covered in soot and blood, collapsed in the streets. Some wept. Others laughed. Many did not rise again, their bodies finally surrendering after weeks of defiance. But their sacrifice had carried a message across the stars. Strength was not measured by muscle or armor. It was measured by will, by endurance, by the refusal to surrender. The frail had proven that humanity's weakest were still stronger than the galaxy's finest warriors. In the aftermath, those who survived were honored. The old man in the wheelchair who detonated a tank became a statue in Chicago. The exosuit patients of Cairo became legends, their names etched into steel. The girl who defeated the Draeger warlord in Mexico City became a symbol of Earth's defiance, her frailty immortalized as humanity's strength. And everywhere, Across the ruined cities of Earth, a new saying spread. If you fear the weak, you cannot face the strong. From orbit, the stars shone cold and silent once more. The Draeger had fled, but the message they carried with them would echo across the galaxy. Humanity is not to be measured by appearance. Even their frailest can shatter empires. And if the day ever came when Earth sent its strongest, the galaxy would tremble.